whatever job I had, wherever I lived. When I went to Brookline High School, I biked to school most days. Sometimes I'd walk. And now, yeah, I've been biking for 20 years.
I came from a family of 12, so getting around to sporting events or going over to a friend's house, you figured out how to get there, whether you walked or you rode a bike.
Right around that time where I decided to, maybe I should go to college, I had some friends that biked for transportation sometimes. I was a big runner when I started doing that, and I knew I wouldn't have a lot of time to run. So I had this plan. I'm like, all right, if I bike to class, then I'll be doing two things at once. I'll be getting somewhere and I'll be getting, a good workout.
So I know there were almost no bike lanes when I was in high school, and yet my friends and I would bike everywhere.
And that was the main way of getting around. Once in a blue moon, you get a ride,
I've been in the Boston area since 2014, and I've seen a huge growth of people biking just from being out on the streets. It used to be that if I saw a bicyclist coming down the street, the opposite way of me, I would always look at them because I would at least recognize them, you know what I mean, if not know who they were, and it's hey, but it's not like that anymore. It's rare, they're all different kinds of people biking every day.
I was in the Netherlands over the summer, and there were tons and tons of other bikes. So I faced bike traffic for the first time in my life, and it honestly was a lot less scary than car traffic. Cars are a challenge when you're in a car, and cars are a challenge when you're on a bike. And I find cars much more difficult to negotiate than other bikes. Cars are just scary because they can kill you.
I'm always trying to be forward thinking as far as how can we do things better, So for that reason, I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 16. I see the way people drive, for one thing, and a good percentage of them violate the rules of the road, whether it's speeding or driving aggressive or illegal turns.
I live in the corner by West Roxbury, in the farthest south corner. I live on the border with West Roxbury. Lots of days I bike to school in the morning and bike home. I bike to friends' houses in Coolidge Corner or Washington Square or wherever. Just everyday commutes. The bike lanes disappear and reappear really depending on the width of the road. So it's random, and it's really bad if I'm in a bike lane and it disappears and there's lots of cars driving and I can't merge.
So this year, there's a town meeting member in Precinct 16, Richard Murphy, who is advocating a relatively inexpensive, it would just be paint and plastic posts, but a relatively inexpensive but pretty significant upgrade of the biking infrastructure from the Baker School neighborhood to Brookline High School. And if that happened, it would be a game changer for people who are riding from the Baker neighborhood to here. It's really hairy. You're on Clyde and Lee Streets and going around Putterham Circle, and it can be really frightening. And a protected bike lane along that route would make a huge difference.
So there's just your basic bike lane with just a painted line, and those are fine. There's not necessarily anything wrong with them. They're basic and they're obviously cheap. It's just paint or some other material to mark up the street. But in certain situations, higher speeds or greater traffic volume, you want to have some more protection for bicyclists and also encourage more types of bicyclists to ride, because a lot of people in general just don't feel safe with this when there's just a painted line.
Separated super cool. Allendale just got repaved, and they put just a foot or two of dashed line in between the bike lane and the car lane, and it feels really secure.
I know a couple of the high school students who ride their bikes from South Brookline, from Hancock Village. They have no protection. There's no designation on the roadway for a bicycle lane. I think that's unfair to them or anybody else who utilizes the roadway there.
You really only have a couple options. Usually it's just Lee Street which is fine, I guess. There's you can go down by Jamaica Pond on Goddard. It's just, it's very like, it's fine. It could be better. I feel like the bike lanes are wide enough in most places that I feel alright, but on Grove Street, that's not safe at all.
So what I'm trying to do is it's about a 2 mile length in bike route, probably 2 to 3 miles. It starts at the most southern part of Brookline in Hancock Village. It comes up on Independent Drive to Grove Street to Newton, and then it's a left-hand turn down onto Clyde and to Lee Street to get you down to the reservoir, and then to get you to the other side of the reservoir over onto Sumner Road, which will take you down to the high school. If you look at on Google Map, it's almost the straight line, the fastest way for anyone. It takes 22 minutes, according to Google, a 22-minute bike ride to get from point A to point B from Hancock Village, and then up to the high school.
Richard
Murphy.
Murphy, right?
Yeah.
No, he has presented to us. We have, he's made some updates recently. We have the most recent updates to his proposal. I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. I know that there's a lot of demand for a connection like this, and I want to make something happen.
I think it would just make commuting every day more consistent and stable, and I would worry less about it. So it would just make it feel more solid and dependable as a transport method for me.
There are a lot of considerations that need to be dealt with in order for something to actually happen. But we're kind of in the process of digesting what he is proposing, and like adding a new traffic signal or something like that is obviously not something that's considered quick build. Like that takes a lot of money and time and design. And so those types of things, sometimes the things that take a significant amount of design aren't that obvious. So we're trying to find some of those and be like, I know this doesn't sound like it's a lot, but it actually does. It require a lot of analysis in order for this thing to happen.
My route is mostly on bike lanes, and even though they're not protected bike lanes and they could be much better, I think especially for people who aren't as experienced as I am, it's so much better with bike lanes, and it's so much better with the infrastructure that we have now compared to when I started. Like when I started riding to work, there were no bike lanes along, I don't think, any of my route. I would ride kind of out of the way along the Charles River just so that I had more of a protected ride. And now I ride through Alston, and there are bike lanes by the side of the road that I ride in, and that makes a huge difference. But it's still, I don't think, good enough for people who are less experienced or less, I don't know, overconfident or something. And so I think it could be much better.
Brookline itself is pretty varied as far as like what the development looks like, the density and stuff like that. We have more or less a kind of north and south Brookline. The roughly north of Route 9 is like a lot more dense and urban. South of it, especially continuously like going south, like you get more and more lower density as you go down there, more suburban. So a lot of those roads are higher volume and much higher speeds, and just have these like long sweeping curves. And that just makes it harder to make safe bike infrastructure. And I mean, you probably see fewer people biking down there because there is, less infrastructure in that part because it's harder. So all of these kind of challenges build on themselves. But I think the town has done a really great job in making progress in general. Allendale Road, we just finished some really nice bike lanes on there a few months ago. So that was a big win for us, and we have more stuff like that planned in South Brookline because we know that there's the demand for it. And I think it'll be really exciting to see once some of that stuff gets built out, like how many more people do start biking there. And it will just really prove the kind of like, if you build it, they will come premise, and it's real.
City of Boston, they plan by next year or over the next 3 years that over 50% of their residents will be less than 500 feet away from any bike lane infrastructure. And that they said that in 3 years' time, 70% of the jobs will be connected to a bike lane.
I really like the areas with the green bars, like the green bike lanes, but that's mostly by BU, so don't see that every day.
Right now on Independent Drive, Grove Street, Newton Street, Clyde Street, Lee Street, is all 2 lanes. It's designed of something that goes back to the 50s when they created the interstate. And the mindset of management was, how can we move as many vehicles from point A to point B? And that's basically, I think, part of South Brookline was developed that way on these particular roadways that I mentioned, which I don't think that works anymore. I think there's a demand for other modes of transportation. There's the speed factor, as I mentioned. And I think it also is that, do we want South Brookline to continue to be this way?